Welcome to BL Stories, where romance, drama, and unforgettable boys' love come to life. Love knows no limits, and the best stories aren't always straight. Subscribe now and join our growing BL-loving family. Christian's POV. I woke up to a soft buzzing sound near my head. I already had one arm securely wrapped around Alex's waist, holding him close. With my free hand, I reached for my phone. The second I answered the call, I knew I'd regret it. "Christian," Brad's voice came through the line. "What?" I mumbled, barely awake. "You were supposed to transfer the files back to me last night. What happened?" I glanced at the clock on the nightstand. 6 in the morning. "I got busy," I replied, sitting up slowly. I thought the movement might wake Alex, but instead he shifted slightly, curling closer into my lap. He looked peaceful in his sleep, and I gently ran my fingers through his hair. It wouldn't last long. He'd be in for a rough few hours once that hangover kicked in. "Well, now that you're not busy, I need you to send those files this morning," Brad said, interrupting the moment. "Can't it wait a few hours?" I asked, already knowing his answer. "Get them to me before our mother starts asking about them." I sighed and slowly eased myself out of bed, careful not to disturb Alex too much. I tucked the blanket around him again, and when he instinctively reached for me, he found a pillow instead. His face was still a little puffy from the night before. It was clear he'd been crying, and that stung more than I wanted to admit. I didn't know why, but I was determined to find out. Grabbing a pen from the nightstand, I scribbled a quick note. "I went down to the business center to finish some work. I'll probably be back before you wake up. If not, please try not to get sick on the bed." I placed the note gently on my side of the bed. He might not even see it, but at least I left something. Since today was technically a free day for us, I chose some faded jeans and a hoodie. It felt good to dress down for once. Every movement I made was careful. I didn't want to wake him. Honestly, nothing sounded better than crawling back into bed with Alex and ignoring the world, but Brad sounded just about ready to lose his mind. I was ready to power through whatever work nonsense Brad had waiting, just so I could enjoy the rest of the day with Alex. Alex's POV. I woke up with a sudden, undeniable need to run to the bathroom. As the sunlight streamed through the tall hotel windows, I threw off the covers and stumbled to the toilet just in time. Everything hit at once, and it was brutal. My stomach twisted, and I could barely breathe between waves of nausea. It was, without a doubt, the worst hangover I'd ever had. Broken memories of the night before crept in, blurry and scattered. I remembered talking to my mom, leaving Christian in the lounge, a vague exchange at the front desk, something about a bar. I didn't remember getting a cab, so the place must have been close. Then it hit me. Oh no. I had missed the third meeting with Christian. I had gotten completely out of it and skipped something important, again. Seriously, Alex. What were you thinking? I mentally kicked myself. How could you be that careless? I blinked toward the bedroom. Christian wasn't there. But on the neatly made side of the bed was a small piece of paper. I tried to get up to read it, but the room spun, and I dropped back down to throw up again. Judging by the aftertaste, I guessed I'd been drinking whiskey, mixed with soda? That had to be it. I never drink soda. It always makes hangovers worse. Which meant I must have been far gone enough to take the bartender's suggestion. Speaking of bartenders, I had a faint memory of one chatting with me while I was still semi-sober. I couldn't remember what we talked about. Once I managed to catch my breath, I whispered, "I'm never drinking again." "That's a promise I'm going to hold you to," came Christian's voice. I jumped. He was suddenly standing at the bathroom door, a glass of water in one hand and a bottle of ibuprofen in the other. I stared at the medicine like it was a life-saving gift. "Can I have one?" I asked hoarse. "In a minute," he replied, stepping inside and sitting down beside me on the bathroom floor. I blinked, then blinked again. Was Christian Ivanov really sitting on a hotel bathroom floor right now? Was he okay? I mean, I was the one throwing up and looking like a disaster, but still, this wasn't exactly his style. "Right now, we need to talk," he said gently. I couldn't tell what was worse, the pounding in my head or the slow return of all the embarrassing memories from last night. "Talk?" I echoed, my voice a little shaky. Yup, I was totally getting fired. There was no way he was just going to let this go. Yes, Christian nodded, setting the water beside me. I want you to tell me about your mother. Christian's POV. 1 hour earlier. The files have been sent, I said as soon as Brad answered. Thank you, he replied. Are you heading back today? We've got one more night here. We'll fly back tomorrow morning. Alright, see you then. The line went dead. Brad sounded stressed, and I was pretty sure I knew why. Our mother was likely breathing down his neck. She had already texted me a few hours ago asking about the gala. As much as I loved her, her constant involvement in our work made it harder for everyone. I understood she wanted to be more included, but it was starting to affect performance. Brad, for instance, probably forgot to update HR on Alex's payroll. That meant I'd have to fix it manually once we got back. What I really needed was for her to give us a little space. I was about to search for Jill's number, our HR specialist, when I accidentally opened the message thread with Joan. She had texted me the name of the bar Alex went to last night. By then, I had already gotten the same information out of Emma, the front desk clerk, as soon as her shift resumed. I still didn't fully understand what had happened. One moment, Alex seemed fine. The next, he was completely out of it. I knew I didn't have the right to dig too deep, but I couldn't stop myself from hitting the call button. It rang a few times before a tired voice answered. Hello. Hi Joan, this is Christian, I said. She cleared her throat, and her voice instantly changed into a more upbeat tone. Hi, Christian. Sorry, just woke up. What can I do for you? I just wanted to thank you for your message about the bar. I'm sorry I didn't reply last night. It was kind of a chaotic evening. No worries at all, she replied quickly. I'm just glad Alex made it back safely. He's had nights where he's ended up in Canada. That caught me completely off guard. I don't mean to pry, I said cautiously, but did Alex tell you anything about what happened? It was all so sudden. I was able to patch things up with John, but missing that meeting could have been a big setback. Joan hesitated. I don't think it's really my place to share much, but I also get wanting to make sure someone's okay. I appreciated her caution, but let's be honest, Alex and I were well past a typical employee-employer relationship. She sighed. I'm going to tell you some things. But if Alex ever finds out, you better say you got it from a fortune cookie or a dream or something. Just don't mention my name. You have my word. Joan paused for a moment before continuing. Alex had a tough childhood. His dad passed away while deployed overseas. His mom, she didn't cope well. She turned to some unhealthy habits and became emotionally dependent on Alex. He was still a kid when all of that fell on his shoulders. She constantly leaned on him, for support, for stability, for everything. I sat back in my chair, quietly fiddling with a pen. With every word she said, something twisted in my chest. He dove into school, into books. But even as an adult, his mom still leans on him in ways that aren't fair. Every time he says no to her, she brings up her trauma, as if he wasn't grieving too. It's guilt-tripping, plain and simple. I didn't respond. I just listened, jaw tight. He told me she called him yesterday, Joan continued. Now, I'm not saying drinking was the best response, but that woman could push anyone to the edge. I met her once, and let's just say it wasn't pleasant. I appreciate you sharing this, I said gently. I know I probably woke you, and I'm sorry for that. I'll make it up to you when we're back. Don't worry about it, she replied kindly. If it's about Alex, I really don't mind. I found myself smiling after we hung up. Alex had someone in his corner. Someone real. Someone I was slightly envious of. He had a support system, something that, for the longest time, I didn't believe he had. Still, I didn't understand why someone surrounded by people who truly cared still insisted on carrying everything alone. As I left the business center, I realized there was one more call I needed to make. The line rang once before Brad picked up. Yes, Christian? He still sounded stressed. First of all, I said calmly, you need to relax. This is just our mother asking questions, not a government audit. If you keep acting panicked, the staff will notice. I heard Brad exhale. Got it? What's the favor? I need you to run a full background check on Alex's mother. Should I ask why? No, I replied. Just get me what you can. As soon as possible. Present time. My mother? Alex asked, rubbing his eyes. He looked drained. His eyes were still red, evidence of the rough night he'd had. Yes, I said gently. I want you to tell me about her. You missed an important meeting last night. I just want to understand what led to that. His eyes lowered, avoiding mine. There was guilt written all over his face, and when he gave me a soft, apologetic smile, it tugged at something in my chest. I'm really sorry, Christian, he said. I can't believe I let things get that out of hand. Yes, the call from my mom upset me, but going to that bar, getting that drunk, that was still my decision. I take full responsibility. I appreciate the apology, I said, but that's not enough. You need to stop carrying all of this by yourself. He blinked, surprised. Your mother upset you. That's okay to admit. People, no matter their title or relationship to you, can be toxic. You're not responsible for their behavior, but you are responsible for how you respond to it. Alex stared at me quiet. Let me help you, I added. You don't have to do this alone anymore. Alex's POV. She's always been a little dependent, I began quietly. Even before my dad passed away. She struggled to take care of herself, let alone raise a family. Eventually, I became the one paying for everything, covering the bills, providing whatever she needed. I swallowed the painkillers Christian had handed me and leaned my head back against the cool bathroom wall. The nausea had mostly passed, but it left behind a pounding headache. It's not unusual to want to take care of your mother, Christian replied gently. That's not a bad thing. I know, I said sighing, but I also know better. I'm enabling her. Every time I send money, it disappears almost immediately. Sometimes I honestly wonder if she thinks money grows on trees. I paused, then said quietly, I know she's using it on alcohol. Possibly more. Christian leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. Then it's time to set some boundaries. You're not obligated to keep fixing things with money. Let her know that you're not going to support her habits anymore. If she wants help, real help, she can reach out when she's ready to change. But not before that. I nodded slowly. He wasn't saying anything I hadn't already heard from Joan. The truth just hurt more coming from him. Maybe because part of me actually wanted to believe I could still fix everything. Of course, it was easier said than done. Christian shifted closer until we were eye level. He lowered himself to his knees so we were face to face. His eyes looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days. I remembered that I hadn't slept much before our trip either, and judging by the state I was in, I probably looked worse than him, hungover and completely wrecked. His gaze lingered on mine, and I suddenly felt hyper-aware of how close we were. My skin prickled with nerves. Was he going to kiss me? The thought made my heart race. Flashes of last night drifted through my memory, blurry and faint, but one stood out. Christian helping me out of my work clothes. Did we kiss? Before I could finish the thought, Christian broke the silence. But enough of the heavy stuff, he said, brushing his thumb lightly under my chin before rising to his feet. We've got one more day in the city before we fly back. Let's not spend it on bathroom floor therapy. He extended a hand down to me. Come on. I know a spot with the best hangover pho in town. I took his hand. Christian, if you're turning left, you have to yield to all the oncoming traffic, including the ones turning right. That's what left turn yield on green means, I explained as calmly as I could from the passenger seat. What? So not only do I have to wait for the ones going straight, I've got to yield for the ones turning too? That's a lot of waiting. Seems excessive. Well, the alternative is a car crash. I'm honestly surprised we're still alive after that last turn, I muttered under my breath as we waited to be seated at the restaurant. Before Christian could argue back, we were both startled by someone calling our names from across the dining area. Turning toward the voice, we saw John Terry waving from a booth, motioning for us to join him. Christian smiled politely but immediately turned to me. Okay, listen carefully. Don't bring up last night. Don't mention the bar. Just apologize. Christian, an apology kind of requires me to speak, I said, confused. Don't get clever with me, he replied, narrowing his eyes. I wasn't trying to be clever. I genuinely didn't know what he wanted me to do. Stay silent? Say sorry but also say nothing? His instructions were not exactly clear. Alex. Christian. John greeted warmly. It's so nice to see you both out and about. Please, come join me for brunch. As we walked toward the table, I spotted someone else sitting across from John, Jack Nicholson. Just great. Christian's face immediately flushed a deeper shade of red. His entire posture tensed. Before he could sit next to Jack and turn the booth into a battlefield, I quickly slid into the seat beside Jack, forcing Christian to sit next to John instead. What have you two been up to today? John asked, his eyes flicking between us. Hopefully enjoying the city? I wasn't sure if I was supposed to respond or not, but thankfully, Christian stepped in. We're trying to enjoy our last day here, he said smoothly. Alex and I haven't had a proper break from work in weeks, so I wanted to treat him to a low-stress outing. That sounds lovely, John said, nodding. Then Jack turned toward me. So, Alex, how are you liking our city so far? Christian visibly tensed again. It's Alexander, he corrected firmly. But you just said, Jack began, confused. I know what I said, Christian cut him off. It's Alex to me. But it's Alexander to you. But John just... I heard him too. Still Alexander to you. I glanced between the two of them. The tension between Christian and Jack was electric. If looks could throw punches, this brunch would be over in a heartbeat. Then Jack smirked. Well, Alexander, it looks like you had quite the night. Word is you ended up at a bar? Sounds like someone had a little too much fun. Christian's jaw tightened, and his nostrils flared. Let's not pretend we were all behaving, John chimed in, casually defusing the tension. You didn't show up to the third meeting either, Jack. Jack looked slightly rattled. John leaned in, smiling casually. In fact, I reached out to a friend of mine here in the city. He runs a few, let's say, entertainment venues. Apparently, he saw someone very familiar at one of them last night. I blinked. I didn't know you were a fan of honey, Jack, John added cheerfully. A strip club on a Monday evening? That's bold. Jack turned several shades of red. I nearly choked on my water. Christian's POV. Alex and I finished up lunch with John and Jack. Despite the constant urge I had to give Jack a piece of my mind, the meal went better than I expected. Alex apologized, repeatedly, for his behavior the night before. At least 926 times. So many, in fact, that even John started apologizing. When I asked him why, he just shrugged and said, I have no clue. His apologies are contagious. I managed to steer Alex out of the restaurant before he started offering to polish John's shoes or something equally dramatic. We said our goodbyes and headed out into the city. I was going to ask Alex what he wanted to do next, but when I turned around, he was already several yards ahead, walking toward Times Square. And so began our spontaneous city adventure. No matter how many times I visit New York, the energy here always catches me off guard. The towering buildings, the flashing lights, the sheer volume of people. It's overwhelming and awe-inspiring all at once. But let's be honest, driving here looks like chaos on wheels. We passed 6 accidents in just 2 blocks. No wonder everyone opts for walking or public transport. Walking seemed like the smarter choice, and we probably got where we were going faster anyway. Alex's attention was glued to the surroundings. Well, mine was mostly on him. Every few minutes he'd stop to admire a street performer, a storefront, or something random that caught his interest. I took him to every cool spot I could think of. And when the sun began to dip below the skyline, I couldn't believe how fast the time had passed. It hit me then, we'd have to call it an early night. Our flight tomorrow morning was painfully early. We ended our day at a quiet park near the lake, not far from where we'd had lunch. The calm water and soft green grass were the perfect contrast to the buzz of the city. I think this is a good spot to end the day, I said, dropping onto the grass. Alex joined me with a content sigh. This place makes me want to stay forever, he said with a smile. I felt the same way. We'll come back, I told him. He nodded, his eyes returning to the peaceful view. He probably assumed I meant a work trip. But I didn't. I meant a real vacation. No business meetings. No deadlines. Just the two of us, exploring every inch of the city, together. "So, what now?" he asked, turning his gaze back to me. "What's our next move?" "We'll head back to the office, start preparing for the gala, finalize things with Maverick Corp, and move forward with production," I explained. He nodded again, but this time, his eyes stayed locked on mine. I could tell something was on his mind. He began biting his bottom lip, slowly and rhythmically, and then lightly brushed over it with his tongue. A simple action, but it caught my attention like a spark in a dark room. "Is it okay if we head back to the hotel?" he asked quietly. My voice came out raspier than I intended. "Yeah. Let's go." Alex slid the hotel room key into the door, pushing it open for both of us. The room looked almost exactly the same as when we first arrived, just with the addition of a few open suitcases and some of Alex's clothes scattered around. "We need to set an alarm," I reminded him. "We've got to check out by 5:30 a.m. if we want to make our flight." Alex groaned dramatically. I wasn't surprised. This was probably the earliest he'd ever had to wake up. He started picking up the clothes he'd left out. When he reached for the tie he wore the night before, he paused. "What's up?" I asked, noticing the far-off look on his face. "Last night," he said slowly, his fingers brushing the tie. "I think I'm starting to remember more." He paused, then looked up at me. Did I kiss you?" I stopped what I was doing and looked at him directly. "Yes," I said simply. He froze. I'm so sorry." I walked toward him before he could finish. "Don't apologize," I said gently. "There's nothing to be sorry for. I shouldn't have done that. I was out of it and..." I stepped closer again. "Do you regret it?" My voice was calm but firm. He blinked, caught off guard. I repeated myself. "Did you regret the kiss?" He took a small step back, but there was nowhere else to go. He was already backed up against the wall. He started, but I closed the distance between us completely. "Because I don't regret it," I said quietly. I could see his chest rising and falling a little faster now. His cheeks flushed with color. "You don't?" he asked, voice soft. I shook my head. Slowly, I reached up and ran my finger gently along his jawline, then back down toward his chin. His eyes fluttered shut at the touch. I leaned in, speaking softly near his ear. "Let's do this differently this time, no confusion." He shivered at the sound of my voice. I lingered there, close enough to hear every breath. "Alexander Hamilton," I whispered, "may I kiss you?" His answer came out so softly I almost missed it. "Yes." Alex's POV. "Let's try something a little different this time, so there's no confusion," Christian whispered, his voice low and close. There was something about the way he said it, steady, yet intense, that made my knees feel like jelly. A shiver rushed through me, my breath catching in my throat as he leaned closer. "Alexander Hamilton," he said softly, his lips near my ear. "May I kiss you?" My heart was racing so fast I could barely form a sentence, but I nodded and whispered the only word that mattered. "Yes." Christian pulled back slightly, our eyes meeting. His were a stormy blue, searching, asking, still making sure. When he saw the answer in mine, he gently rested his hand at the side of my neck and leaned in. The kiss was everything, gentle but sure, soft but undeniably real. It wasn't rushed or careless or confused. His lips moved with mine in a way that made the rest of the world fall away. The wall behind me was the only thing keeping me upright as I melted into the moment. His hands were everywhere, steadying, holding, learning the shape of me as if we had all the time in the world. He smelled like peppermint and cologne, familiar and comforting, while the press of his body against mine made it impossible to think about anything else. When we finally pulled away for air, we were both breathless. My chest rose and fell quickly, and I could see he was just as affected. "These clothes are kind of getting in the way," Christian muttered with a sheepish grin. He tugged gently at my shirt, asking silently for permission. I nodded. He helped me out of it, careful and slow, and I stood there, heart pounding, feeling more exposed than ever. Not just physically, but emotionally. Still, I trusted him. Somehow, in the short time we'd really known each other, that trust had formed like stone. His eyes traveled over me, and I felt a rush of nerves. I didn't look like him, chiseled, confident, but I hoped he didn't care. He didn't. The next kiss confirmed it. Christian guided us away from the wall, our lips still connected, and gently helped me lie down on the bed. He was being careful with me, and I could feel it in every touch. My hands found the hem of his shirt, hesitantly tugging. I wanted to see him too, all of him. He noticed and pulled it off in one smooth motion. That alone sent a thrill through me. His chest was a canvas of ink and strength, and I couldn't help but whisper, "Christian, you're perfect." He froze for a moment, almost startled by the words, then lowered his head, this time pressing a slow, tender kiss to the curve of my neck. Goosebumps followed. The intensity never faded, but it shifted into something even more meaningful. Every moment felt like it carried weight. We weren't rushing, we were exploring, learning each other. The world outside that hotel room didn't exist. There was no gala, no company deadlines, no early flight. Just us. Two people learning how to care for one another in real time. He kissed me again, his fingers tracing gentle lines over my back. I ran my hands across his shoulders, still marveling at how real this all felt. There were no more questions between us. No more doubt. Just an understanding. This meant something. He meant something. Christian's POV. "Holy wow," Alex whispered, still breathless. He was lying beside me, his chest rising and falling as he tried to catch his breath. I let my gaze drift over him for a moment, still in awe. Quietly, I climbed back onto the bed and placed gentle kisses along his shoulder, down his arm, just little reminders of how I felt. "That was incredible," I murmured, meeting his eyes. They were still closed, and for a second, I just took him in. The relaxed lines of his face, the long lashes resting on his cheeks, the subtle dimples near his mouth when he smiled. I reached out and gently brushed my fingertips along his cheek. His eyes fluttered open. "I want to return the favor," he said softly, though his voice was laced with exhaustion. I chuckled, brushing his hair from his forehead. "Maybe tomorrow," I replied, planting a quick kiss on his lips, then another on his nose, and finally his forehead. "Right now, let's get some sleep." He didn't argue. I got up, tugged the covers over him, and set multiple alarms on my phone. Something told me waking him up tomorrow was going to be a whole challenge on its own. After slipping into bed beside him, he curled against me. "You're cold," I said quietly, reaching for a spare shirt to offer him. He shook his head. "I'll just use you as my blanket," he mumbled sleepily, nestling into the crook of my neck. His breath against my skin sent a ripple of warmth through me. Even though the moment earlier had been deeply intimate, it was this, his head against my chest, his trust, that made my heart race. I wasn't sure what this meant for us moving forward. I'd never been with a guy before, not like this. But with Alex, nothing about it felt uncertain. In fact, for once in my life, things felt right. Alex was brilliant, sharp, quick, emotionally guarded, but undeniably sincere. He challenged me, not just intellectually, but personally. And I liked that. I admired that. With him, it didn't feel like a game. It felt like a partnership. He was slowly becoming my priority. And deep down, I hoped I was becoming his too. I stayed awake long after he'd fallen asleep. I thought I'd be out in minutes, but instead, I found myself watching him, quietly, respectfully. Alex slept like someone fighting battles even in his dreams. He moved often, restless and tense. I recognized it. I'd seen it before, a few nights ago. If it weren't for the way I held him close, I probably would have gotten an elbow to the face or a knee to the ribs by now. What haunted him? There were so many questions I wanted to ask him. About his childhood, his mom, why he turned to alcohol the way he did, what he was running from. But I didn't know how to bring those questions up without pushing too far. Alex didn't ask for help. He didn't show his cracks easily. You'd never know something was wrong until he broke down in front of you. But I wanted him to know this. He didn't have to carry it all alone. He didn't have to wear that perfect mask all the time. It was okay to be vulnerable. It was okay to not be okay. And no matter what he'd done or would do, I wasn't going to judge him. I'd be there. Boys. That was the promise I made in my heart. I was pulled out of my thoughts by the sound of my phone ringing. At first, I thought it was one of the alarms, but when I glanced at the clock, it was only 4 a.m. Still dark outside. Still quiet. The screen lit up with a name, Brad. I blinked a few times, adjusting to the brightness, then answered. "Hey, what's up?" I asked, keeping my voice low. There was a jumble of sounds on the other end, shouting, papers rustling, what sounded like a television or radio in the background. "Brad," I said again, sitting up slightly. "Christian, you there?" His voice was shaky, frantic. "Yeah, I'm here. What's going on? Why are you calling this early?" "We've got a situation," he said quickly. "I booked you on a flight at 6 a.m. Brad, slow down. What's happening?" I cut in, trying to keep my voice steady. His words tumbled out, hard to decipher. But the tone said everything. Something was seriously wrong. "Christian? I need you here yesterday. It's urgent." I sat up straighter, careful not to wake Alex. "Brad," I repeated, firmer now. "Tell me what's going on." He hesitated. Then finally, in a quieter, more serious tone, he said, "I think we've been hacked." Christian's POV. "What happened?" I asked the moment Brad stepped into my office. "I'm still trying to figure it out," he said, setting a stack of paperwork on my desk. I logged into the servers shortly after midnight and noticed an unauthorized user had accessed the system. Somehow, they bypassed our firewall. "Christian, they got into some seriously confidential files, corporate records, private communications, things dating all the way back to the founding of the company and our family." My stomach dropped. "Did they access anything personal? Anything about you?" "I'm not sure," Brad replied, rubbing his temples. "There were files in that archive we haven't touched in years. This is really bad." Brad looked nothing like his usual composed self. His tie hung loosely around his neck, and he wasn't even wearing his suit jacket. His hair, usually perfectly styled, was disheveled. If Brad was unraveling, that meant things were worse than I feared. My mind raced. If someone discovered Brad was my brother, or worse, dug into anything involving our mother, it could all blow up. And that wasn't just a professional concern, that was deeply personal. Pull every single file they accessed. We need to see exactly what they saw. Brad let out a slow breath. "It's a massive list, Christian. I already started, but it's like searching for a needle in a haystack. I don't care how long it takes. We'll go through them all. Tonight if we have to." "We're going to need more than just the two of us," he said honestly. "Whoever broke in wasn't just poking around. They were searching for something. They jumped through files from different years, departments, even unrelated projects." I scanned the report in front of me, decades of data, all potentially compromised. "I think I've got just the team." Alex's POV. "What are we doing here?" Derek leaned in, voice low and suspicious. I shrugged. "No clue." The three of us, Derek, Joan, and I, sat awkwardly in the waiting area outside Christian's office. 10 minutes had passed since we were summoned, and there was still no sign of him. Given how panicked he seemed earlier, I hadn't expected to see him at all today. He'd woken me up at what felt like the crack of dawn, barely saying anything besides, "We need to pack. Now." We boarded an early flight. He barely spoke. The only time he acknowledged me was when his hand slipped into mine, and even then he stared straight ahead, lost in thought. Something was wrong. Really wrong. "I'm as lost as you are," I whispered back to Derek. "Do you think we're getting fired?" Joan asked nervously. I shook my head. "No. This feels different." Before I could say anything more, the office doors opened. "Come in," Brad said, holding the door open for us. I barely recognized him. Brad usually looked like he'd stepped out of a catalog. Today, not so much. No tie, no jacket, and hair that looked like it had been through a storm. We filed into the room. Christian was sitting behind his desk, surrounded by boxes filled with files. When his eyes met mine, my chest fluttered. He offered a soft smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Have a seat," he said, motioning for us to sit. We did. "You're probably wondering why I pulled you away from your usual duties today," Christian began. "First, thank you all for coming in on such short notice. Brad and I need your help with something urgent." His eyes landed on me, and I felt the heat rise in my face. "Early this morning, we discovered that someone accessed our internal network without authorization," he continued. "They broke through our security and gained access to confidential company files." Before he could finish, Derek suddenly blurted, "Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I won't visit those sketchy websites anymore, I swear." I immediately rubbed the bridge of my nose. "Oh no, I didn't mean any harm," Derek added, completely unaware of the gravity of the situation. "Sometimes you just need a little pick-me-up, you know?" "Derek," I groaned, "please stop talking." When I looked back at Christian, he had his hand over his mouth, clearly trying not to laugh. "I needed that," he chuckled. "Thanks for the comic relief. But no, Derek, this isn't about you. And yes, we'll have a separate conversation about your internet habits another day." He exhaled and looked at us more seriously. This breach was external, most likely professional. Brad called me in the early hours to tell me. "That's why we had to leave so abruptly this morning," he added, looking at me. I nodded. "We've been able to track which files were accessed. But unfortunately, it's a lot. Some documents date all the way back to the start of this company. It's not something Brad and I can handle alone." "So, why us?" Joan asked. Before Christian could answer, Brad stepped in. "Because you're probably the only employees Christian's taken the time to really know." I bit my lip to hold in a laugh. Christian just shot Brad a look. "As much as I'd love to deny that, he's not wrong," Christian admitted. "Also, I wish I could say you had a choice in helping us, but you don't." He glanced at each of us in turn. "I can't say how long this will take. So, if you had plans tonight, might want to cancel them." Alex's POV. "Ivanov Corp did business with Playboy?" Derek blurted out. I looked up from the stack of files I was combing through and gave him a sharp glare. Christian just shrugged. "There was a photo shoot collaboration in the 90s. Playboy reached out to feature some of our products in their publication. It ended up being a strong marketing move and got us a few magazine spreads." "Oh, but I'm the strange one for browsing certain websites at work," Derek mumbled. Yes, you are," Joan snapped. "Nobody else around here is watching adult content between customer service calls." I stifled a laugh as I looked over at her. She was sitting next to Brad, both of them knee-deep in paperwork. Unlike Christian and me, who were only half engaged, they were locked in, flipping through documents with intense focus. I was doing my best just to stay awake. I noticed a small smile twitch at the corner of Brad's lips from Joan's comment. We had started the day sorting files at Christian's desk, but now, 8 hours and over 100 documents later, we were all spread out on the floor of his office, surrounded by boxes and scattered papers. Christian had explained that retrieving the files digitally would take far too long, so they had requested the archived boxes from storage instead. Judging by the dust coating most of them, they hadn't been touched in years. Honestly, it made me wonder how someone had managed to access so many of these files so quickly. Christian sat beside me, trying to stay focused, but I could tell he was fighting fatigue too. He had taken off his tie and undone the top few buttons of his dress shirt. The loose fabric revealed a glimpse of the tattoos inked across his chest and collarbone. I tried not to stare. Really, I did. But every so often, I'd glance up at his lips, remembering the way they had felt on mine, and how much I wanted to feel them again. As I watched Christian and Brad work, I started to notice just how seamlessly they moved together. They had this uncanny rhythm, almost like they could anticipate each other's thoughts. Every time Brad mentioned a company name, Christian would immediately explain what kind of deal had been made. It was clear how close they were, how long they had been doing this together. In just a few hours, I'd learned more about Ivanov Corp than I had in weeks. Anna Ivanov had built connections with an overwhelming number of businesses. She had practically constructed a small empire in the 90s. The company was everywhere. They began as manufacturers, then moved to retail, eventually launching their own stores. They had sponsorships and endorsements across nearly every sport imaginable. One of the files even had a photo of Anna standing next to tennis legend Andre Agassi, with him wearing Ivanov-branded gear. "Wow," I whispered under my breath. "Your mom was incredible." I hadn't realized Christian had heard me until he chuckled quietly. "She was the most determined woman I've ever known," he said. "Whatever she set her mind to, she made happen. She and my father were a powerhouse team." "They were like mitochondria," Derek chimed in out of nowhere. We all looked up at him in disbelief. "What?" Joan asked. "Mitochondria," Derek repeated. "You know, the powerhouse of the cell." I rubbed my temples, fighting a smile and an eye roll at the same time. Derek's mind was a strange place. Christian and Brad, however, were laughing openly. "I can confidently say no one's ever compared my mother to an organelle before," Christian said, still chuckling. "As much as I hate to agree with Derek's weird analogy," Joan added, "your mom really was a force of nature. I'm reading about the first gala she hosted. She donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to nonprofits, visited underserved cities in Russia, and gave back to her community. Honestly, she's kind of my hero." Christian and Brad both smiled at that. I noticed Brad's eyes lingered on Joan just a little longer than expected. Unlike Derek, Joan hadn't embarrassed me once today. She was sharp, efficient, and focused. She had this way of balancing wit with professionalism that made it easy to admire her. And, Derek added with a dramatic sigh, she was also stunning. Just looking at her photos? Total heart-melter. I had to stop myself from groaning out loud. "Derek," Joan said sweetly, "why don't you take a little walk? Grab us some water from the break room?" Her tone was polite, but the glare she gave him told the real story. If no one else was going to shut Derek down, Joan would gladly do it herself. The man lacked a filter, and we all knew it was only a matter of time before he said something even worse. "So far, we found a few questionable files," Brad said with a sigh, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "But nothing major yet. Unfortunately, we've barely made a dent in all this." Christian nodded in agreement. "It's getting late. I might need to send you all home soon." "I can stay," I blurted out, sitting up straighter. "I've worked late here before. I could try running a search script using keywords, something that would help filter out the irrelevant documents. It might save us time." "I'll stay too," Joan added. "Alex was supposed to come over tonight anyway, so if he's staying, I may as well help. Plus, once he gets locked into the tech stuff, we'll need coffee on constant rotation. He can send us the important files and we'll focus on reviewing just those." Christian gave us both a grateful nod. "Thank you. That would really help." "What about Derek?" Brad asked, glancing at the door. Joan shook her head. "We don't speak for him. He's dating someone new, and she's a little intense. If he doesn't get home before midnight, she might stage a dramatic exit. I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up seeing him on a true crime documentary someday." The room broke into laughter. She wasn't wrong, and that was the scariest part. Christian's POV. "So, what does this do?" I asked Alex, reaching past him to point at a small drive plugged into his laptop. "This is the software I mentioned earlier," he replied, fingers tapping the keyboard with practiced ease. "It'll scan through the files using specific keywords and phrases. It'll take some time, but way less than doing it manually." I nodded in understanding, but my attention quickly drifted. When I looked away from the screen and back to Alex, I noticed how tired he looked. His eyes were shadowed, heavy with exhaustion, and his eyelids drooped slightly. Still, he kept working. "Thank you for staying," I said, scooting a little closer. "And this was smart thinking. You never cease to amaze me." The last part slipped out in a whisper, close to his ear. I caught the way he shivered slightly at the sound of my voice. It made me smile. "It kind of makes me want to distract you," I added quietly. Before I could say, or do, anything else, the moment was interrupted by someone clearing their throat at the door. Alex's POV. "How's it going in here?" Brad stepped in, holding 2 cups of coffee. His timing was probably perfect. Just starting it up now, I replied. Any phrases either of you want me to begin with? Brad and Christian exchanged a look I couldn't quite decode, but Christian turned back to me with a suggestion. Let's start with the word lawsuit. See what comes up. That one's going to generate quite a few results, Brad muttered under his breath. I raised an eyebrow. How many legal problems had this company been through? I typed in the keyword and hit search. The lights on the adapter blinked green, and within seconds, the file count started rising. 265, I read aloud, blinking. That many? Yep, Brad said, not even fazed. It happens more than we'd like. Most aren't serious, and almost none ever reach the public. I make sure of that. Christian and I both looked at him. That last line had a bit of a dark tone. I mean, Brad added quickly, realizing the implication, not like in a criminal way. I just know how to keep things quiet. Christian laughed. Let's hope you never have to testify, Brad. You're a brilliant lawyer, but you'd make a terrible defendant. Brad chuckled, the tension broken. I noticed something else in Brad. He seemed lighter around Christian. It was subtle, but the way he carried himself shifted. Less serious attorney, more actual human. It was like Christian brought out a side of him most people didn't get to see. I'd never thought of Christian as someone who calmed others, more like the opposite. But here, the energy was different. Brad had changed out of his work clothes and into gym gear. Good call, his dress shirt earlier had seen better days. It was not a flattering look. Honestly, I was starting to regret not having my own gym bag. It was almost midnight, and my button-down shirt felt like it was getting tighter by the minute. I had undone a few buttons already. Any more, and people would start asking where the dance crew was. I'm going to skim through a few of these files, I said, refocusing. Joan and Brad took seats in the chairs across from my desk, while Christian sat casually on the edge of the table, watching me work. We all looked a little worse for wear, but Joan somehow still looked impeccable. Pencil skirt, heels, tight bun, the whole look still intact. She was holding it together better than anyone. I noticed the way she and Brad were talking. It might have been legal stuff on the surface, but their body language told a different story. Joan had clearly taken an interest in Brad. I made a mental note to give Brad the big brother talk. I didn't care that she was older. Joan was my person. She deserved the best, not someone who'd misread the room. Christian, meanwhile, decided to nudge my foot with his under the desk. I gave him a warning glance. He returned one of his own that clearly said, "Too bad, I'm not stopping." I tried to focus. The 9th file I opened looked like scanned documents, most of them handwritten in Russian. It seemed to reference a birth, but the details were tough to decipher. Only 6 pages loaded, even though it claimed there should be 10. Curious, I returned to the search bar and typed in a new keyword, baby. Most of the initial results were marketing materials, toddler merchandise, baby gear, stuff tied to the sports division. I marked those as low priority and moved on. Then something caught my eye. Another file, again mostly in Russian, but one name stood out clearly, Bradford. Repeated several times. Bradford Ivanov. That name didn't ring any bells. I didn't recall Anna mentioning a Bradford in her rundown of the company's history. I glanced up to see Christian absent-mindedly stirring his now cold coffee, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. Turning back to the screen, I typed in one final search for the night. Bradford Ivanov. Thanks for listening to today's BL story. If it made your heart skip a beat, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Only here on BL Stories, where love knows no limits.